They say the desert keeps its secrets. They whisper that its sands bury the sins of empires, swallowing them whole until even memory turns to dust. But tonight, as you enter the forgotten cliffs, rising like jagged teeth against a starless sky, it feels as if the desert is not hiding anything at all. It feels as if it is watching you. The wind pushes against your back, urging you forward, almost shoving you toward the narrow opening cut into the rock. You don't know how you found this place. You don't know why your feet carried you here, or why the air thickens with each step you take. All you know is that something, some echo, some tremor, some whisper, pulled you toward the place the maps refuse to acknowledge. You expect quiet, the kind of suffocating silence only a tomb can hold. But what greets you is the faint echo of a sound you cannot understand at first. It is not speech, not a chant, not a cry. It is smaller than all of those, a thin, quivering note of fear. Barely a breath, barely a sound at all. Yet it strikes you harder than a shout would. Your hand grazes the wall, and the coldness of the ancient stone feels wrong, as if it has not tasted warmth in centuries. Symbols etched into the walls glow faintly as your presence stirs the dust in the air. You can't read them, but you feel them. They pulse faintly under your fingertips, like veins of something alive. You take another step, and then another. The darkness thickens, swallowing you, and then you see them. At first, they are only silhouettes, shadows moving in slow, synchronized arcs. But as your eyes adjust, the shadows harden into figures. There are 9 of them, standing in a perfect circle around a stone altar carved from a single slab of obsidian. They wear black ceremonial linen that drapes to their ankles, each stitched with gold thread, forming symbols you don't recognize. But they're masks, those you recognize instantly. Jackal faces, long snouts, empty eye sockets. Legends told you these masks were worn during funerary rites for kings. But the men before you are not performing a burial. They move with a softness that feels rehearsed, ritualistic, predatory. And then you see her. A girl kneels at the center of the circle, her wrists bound with braided threads of gold. Her head is lowered, as if she's too weak to lift it. She looks impossibly young, no more than 14, but it's the way she kneels that unsettles you most. Not with dignity, not with faith, but with the defeated stillness of someone who has tried to fight and learned that fighting no longer matters. A temple virgin. At least, that is what the kingdom calls them. Pure, untouched, sacred daughters chosen for the gods. But the sight before you shatters that illusion with ruthless ease. One of the masked priests steps forward, raising a curved obsidian blade. You can see the heat of another victim's blood still clinging to its edge, steaming as it meets the cold air. He lifts it high enough for the moonlight slipping through a crack in the ceiling to catch on its surface, turning the blade blacker than night. The girl trembles. Another priest murmurs a chant, his voice slow, breathy, almost too calm for what is about to happen. His words echo against the chamber walls, bouncing between the carvings as if each syllable has been spoken in this room 1,000 times before. You know now, without needing context or explanation, that this ritual is older than the kingdom itself. You inch closer, your body moving before your mind can protest. Every instinct tells you to run, but something stronger, something heavier, holds you still. You take in every detail, the wax dripping from the carved pillars, the swirling incense that burns your eyes, the faint metallic scent of old blood trapped beneath the stone. And then the chanting stops, as if the room itself is holding its breath. The girl opens her mouth. A sound almost slips out. Almost. But fear crushes it before it is born. Her shoulders slump in resignation. Her fingers curl against the stone floor as if trying to hold on to something, anything. The blade lowers. For the briefest moment, time does something strange. It stretches, it slows. You can almost see the air ripple as the blade moves through it. You can hear your own heartbeat, pounding like a war drum in the silence. And in that suspended moment, the truth hits you. This is not devotion. This is not sacrifice. This is not an offering to any god ever carved into stone. This is cruelty with a crown of holiness. This is power wearing a mask of purity. This is a secret the temple has buried beneath centuries of worship and unquestioned faith. The blade stops an inch above her skin as the priests' voices rise again, this time harsher, faster, more frantic. It is as if they do not seek the god's approval, but are pleading for permission. You feel something shift in the room, a weight, a presence, something ancient, hungry, listening. The girl lifts her head just enough for you to see her eyes. They aren't pleading. They aren't hoping. They are empty. And in that emptiness, you understand. This is not the first time this ritual has been performed, and it will not be the last. The blade descends. Everything changes. You don't remember leaving the chamber. You don't remember how your feet carried you back through the narrow passage, or how the cold night air hit your face like a slap. All you remember is the weight inside your chest, a heavy, pulsing thing that refuses to settle. The kind of weight that forms only when you witness something you were never meant to see. They say the kingdom stands on pillars of faith, tradition, and order. But as you stumble into the open desert, you realize something far darker holds it together. Fear, silence, obedience taught from cradle to grave, woven into every prayer, every festival, every law carved into stone. And somewhere, inside that temple, a force rules from the shadows. But long before the masked priests, long before the obsidian blades and the vanishing girls, there was a child, a boy born into the same kingdom, breathing the same desert air. A boy who did not yet know he would grow into the most feared man to ever touch the temple's sacred stones. Picture him, small, thin, dust in his hair, hollow ribs, like the ridges of a drought-split riverbed. He kneels in the dirt outside a half-built temple, watching workers haul limestone blocks while priests supervise with cold, calculating eyes. His mother lies wrapped in burial cloth nearby, taken by famine weeks earlier. His father hangs from a wooden beam outside the granaries, his body left for the vultures as a warning to all who might steal the king's grain. The boy does not cry, not because he lacks the grief, but because he learned early that tears do nothing but draw attention. Attention in this kingdom is dangerous. He is found by an acolyte, a man with a voice too soft for the harshness of the world around him. The acolyte brings him food, water, shelter, a mat in the corner of the temple's lowest dormitory. The boy thinks it is kindness, but the temple does nothing without purpose. He is placed among the other orphans and novices, taught the sacred hymns, the ancient laws, the techniques of cleansing and preparing offerings. The priests walk past him as if he is invisible. The other boys mock him for his silence, yet he watches everything. He listens to every word. He learns that the gods are invoked with ceremony, but feared with superstition. He learns that priests wield more power than generals. He learns that the king consults them before every decree. He learns that beneath the temple, far below the chambers the public sees, lie hallways no one speaks of openly. He also learns something far uglier. One night, he follows the acolyte who rescued him, curious why the man leaves during hours reserved for sleep. He hopes it is something harmless, a secret prayer, a midnight devotion. What he sees instead changes the shape of his entire life. A corridor lit by faint torchlight, a door carved with symbols he cannot read, and behind that door, a girl no older than he is, dragged by two priests into a chamber his mind cannot yet comprehend. Her eyes are wild with fear. She pleads, she begs. The priests ignore her. The boy's breath stops in his throat. He does not understand what ritual they are about to perform, but some instinct older than language tells him it is wrong, that the word sacred is being used to hide something monstrous. His small hands tremble as he clutches the stone wall. The acolyte who brought him food stands at the threshold of that forbidden room. The kindness in his eyes is gone, replaced by something harder, colder, something that makes the boy realize every gesture of mercy was a lie. When the girl's scream tears through the corridor, the boy flinches, not from the sound itself, but from how swiftly it is silenced. He does not cry that night, not even when he curls onto his sleeping mat and stares at the ceiling until dawn. He only whispers one thought over and over, committing it to the deepest part of his being. Never be helpless, never be powerless, never be the one kneeling. That night builds the foundation. Years pass. The boy becomes a young man, quiet, obedient, unnoticed. The priests prefer him this way. They reward invisibility. They cultivate silence. They train him to move within the temple like smoke slipping under a door. But something is growing behind his calm exterior. A knowledge, sharp as a blade. A hunger, patient as the desert. He watches which priests receive offerings behind closed doors. He memorizes the hidden corridors others pretend do not exist. He learns how to read the patterns of disappearance, how one novice girl vanishes every month, as predictable as the phases of the moon. He learns which rituals are true and which ones are invented to hide darker purposes. He learns that the gods are nothing more than carved stone. He learns that the temple's power does not come from holiness, but from secrets. And then, one night, the moment arrives that shatters the last piece of innocence within him. He follows the high priest through a concealed passageway he should never have discovered. His breath is steady, his steps careful. He has rehearsed this moment in silence for years. What he finds inside that hidden chamber is worse than anything his childhood imagination ever feared. A girl, barely 13, kneeling. Priests in black linen encircling her. The high priest himself preparing a ritual, cloaked in false purity. The young man watches as the girl's hope dissolves, as her plea goes unheard, as a sacred rite exposes itself to be nothing more than cruelty, wrapped in ceremonial lies. Something inside him breaks and reforms. He understands now. The gods will not punish these men. The kingdom will not question them. The people will never know the truth. Power belongs not to the good, not to the faithful, but to those willing to take it. He walks away from the chamber with a new vow carved into his soul. If the temple feeds on fear, then he will become fear itself. If the priests use silence as a weapon, then he will master it. If cruelty crowns the powerful, then he will rise higher than all of them. That night, the boy dies. The man born in his place will reshape the entire kingdom. The man who emerges from the shadows of the temple is no longer the quiet orphan the priests believed they had molded. He moves with purpose now, silent, deliberate, almost spectral, slipping through the corridors of stone like he was carved from the very walls themselves. The others still see him as harmless, obedient, invisible. They do not notice the shift in his gaze, the calm that hides a storm, the patience that sharpens into something far more dangerous than anger. There is a moment when every man becomes what he was destined to be. His moment arrives slowly, like a tide creeping over the sand, swallowing the coastline inch by inch until the world forgets what the shore once looked like. It begins with a silence so deep it feels sacred. He learns first to listen, not to words, but to breaths, the quick inhalations of fear, the long exhalations of guilt, the shallow gasps of those who hide secrets. Every priest has a rhythm, and he memorizes them all. In the communal chambers, he sits unnoticed among the others, tracing patterns in the flickering shadows cast by oil lamps. His ears catch whispers carried through the cracks in the walls. He learns which vestments signify rank, which symbols denote forbidden rites, and why certain novices are treated with a coldness that is too controlled to be accidental. Soon, he discovers the first fracture in the temple's facade. It belongs to a mid-ranking priest, known for his arrogance. The man drinks too heavily from the ceremonial wine and confides in the wrong companions. One night, as the priest stumbles into the outer courtyard, the young man follows him. He remains silent, footsteps blending with the whispering sand, until the drunken priest collapses beside a pillar. The man kneels beside him, offering a supportive hand. The priest, too intoxicated to question anything, laughs and begins to complain about the burdens of the rituals. His words slur, but the meaning is sharp enough to cut. "It isn't for the gods," he mutters. "Nothing is. We serve ourselves. We bend the people with fear. We shape the king like clay." The priest thinks he is speaking to a shadow, an obedient nobody. He has no idea he is feeding a fire. The young man learns more that night than in years of service. Corruption is not scattered in pockets. It runs through the temple like a vein of gold. Every ceremony, every offering, every chant, each one hides a darker truth beneath its polished surface. The priests do not serve the gods. They serve their hunger. His rise begins with this knowledge. He spends his nights watching, documenting the movements of the highest-ranking priests, their routines, their vices, their vulnerabilities. He notices how the high priest's guards change shifts at predictable intervals. He observes which priests fear the dark corridors, which ones linger too long near the forbidden chambers, which ones secretly dread the rituals they pretend to lead with holy devotion. He becomes a collector of secrets, and like all good collectors, he knows that the value of a secret increases when others believe you have none. The first time he leverages what he knows, it is subtle. A priest attempts to punish him for stepping out of line. accusing him of entering a chamber without permission. The man simply tilts his head and asks quietly, "Will you tell the high priest I saw you with the girl in the lower hall last moon?" The priest stiffens, sweat rising instantly on the back of his neck. He steps aside, suddenly respectful. Word travels quickly after that. Not the truth. No, the temple does not deal in truth, but a whisper softer and more dangerous. Leave him alone. He sees too much. He knows too much. His ascent is invisible to the casual eye, but unmistakable to those who understand the language of power. Priests who once overlooked him now greet him cautiously. Acolytes avoid crossing his path. Even the guards at the temple gates seem unsure whether to stop him or bow as he passes. He does not smile. He does not threaten. He does not need to. Power, he has learned, is not loud. It is quiet. It sits behind your eyes and waits for others to notice. The true turning point, his real rise, comes during a festival meant to honor the desert spirits. Thousands gather in the city square. The priests, draped in shimmering linen and gold, perform a procession that winds from the palace gates to the foot of the temple. It is here that the high priest makes his annual proclamation, declaring prosperity, fertility, and the continued blessing of the gods. But the man knows a hidden truth. A drought is coming. The river has already begun to shrink. The granaries are not as full as the king believes. The high priest hoards offerings, and the people will be left hungry long before the next harvest arrives. On the evening before the festival, the man slips into a small chamber beneath the storage hall. He does not bring fire, does not touch the jars, does not disturb a single grain. He only waits, listening as the priests above speak of the ceremony. They speak of deception, of illusions woven to keep the kingdom docile. They speak as if the gods themselves are tools. At dawn, when the high priest raises his arms before the crowd to declare divine blessing, the young man watches from the far edge of the square. He sees the tremor beneath the high priest's gesture, the fear hidden behind the mask of authority, fear of what is coming, fear of exposure, fear of losing control. The young man realizes then that power in this kingdom is a fragile thing. One false proclamation, one failed prophecy, and the temple's facade will crack. That crack is all he needs. Later that night, he approaches a priest known for wavering loyalties. The conversation is brief, quiet, almost affectionate. He does not threaten him. He simply reminds him how quickly secrets slip from trembling hands. The wavering priest breaks. He swears allegiance. One by one, others follow. A glance exchanged during prayer, a whispered warning in a corridor, a promise made in the dark. He builds his foundation the same way the temple built its tyranny, stone by stone, secret by secret, lie by lie. Now, when he walks through the temple halls, candles flicker as if bowing to him. Novices step aside. Priests lower their voices. He has not taken a single title. He has not claimed a single rank. But power bends toward him, all the same. And deep beneath the temple, in the chambers lit by braziers and stained with the shadows of 100 rituals, the masked priests begin to realize something too late. They are no longer the hunters. They have created something far more dangerous than a servant. They have created a man who learned their darkness better than they ever understood it themselves. You remember the first time you heard the chant, low, rhythmic, almost beautiful in its cadence. It trembled faintly through the temple corridors like the heartbeat of something ancient. Even now, walking through the dim pathway, lit only by flickering oil lamps, you can't shake the feeling that the walls themselves are listening. Every grain of sandstone seems alive, holding secrets that should never have survived the centuries. The air is heavy, not warm, not cold, just dense, like it's pressing against you from all sides, a kind of spiritual gravity. And beneath it, a smell you can't quite place, not incense, not oil, something faintly metallic, something human. You step deeper into the sanctum. You hear them before you see them. The priests. Their voices move in perfect unison, layered atop each other like the threads of a woven spell. Their chant is slow, deliberate, ancient. It's the same one whispered by their predecessors, long before ink ever touched papyrus, long before the temples were carved from stone. You can feel the rhythm crawling under your skin, tightening around your ribs. It feels less like a prayer and more like a command. And then you see the chamber. At the center lies a marble platform, polished until it shines like water under moonlight. On it rests a single object, a ceremonial bowl, wide and shallow, decorated with lapis lazuli and golden symbols. Beautiful, if you didn't know what it was used for. The bowl of silence, a vessel not of offering, but of erasure. This was the priest's signature method, more psychological than physical, more symbolic than violent, but devastating in effect. It wasn't the ritual itself that horrified you. It was the way it was done, the way it redefined purity, control, devotion, and sacrifice in ways that no modern mind can fully comprehend without flinching. The bowl was placed before the chosen virgin, sitting at the edge of the platform, her hands trembling, her breath shallow. She was not dragged here. She was raised for this moment, conditioned, groomed, told that her silence was divine, that her voice was unworthy of mortal ears, but sacred to the gods. The priest's method was frightening because it worked on belief, belief sharpened into a weapon. The ritual began with the extinguishing of all light, except the single lamp above the bowl. Darkness folded around the room, swallowing faces, leaving only silhouettes. The priests circled slowly, chanting as they lifted their ceremonial staffs. Their robes brushed the floor in long, sweeping strokes that sounded like whispers. Then came the offering. The girl was instructed to kneel before the bowl. She always obeyed. They all did. The pressure of a lifetime of indoctrination sat heavier than any set of chains. She lowered her head until her forehead touched the cool rim. And then, only then, did the high priest step forward. He carried a scroll, thin, rolled tightly, sealed with wax, a record of her life, a list of every vow she had ever spoken, every confession, every secret. And one by one, the priests would recite them aloud. But not her version, theirs. You realize now the power of rewriting a person's history in front of them, stripping them of their own memories, replacing their truths with new ones. It was a form of psychological annihilation, a quiet, terrifying destruction of self. With each reinterpreted confession, they dipped their fingers into the bowl and touched her lips. It was a symbol. Your voice belongs here, not to you. Over time, the ritual expanded, became more intricate, more manipulative, more terrifying. They introduced layers of symbolism. Feathers, representing purity, dropped into the bowl to show her innocence floating away. ash, representing transformation, sprinkled over her head as a reminder that the gods could remake her entirely. Water from the Nile, representing the world she would never return to. Every element was designed to strip a girl of everything she thought she was, not by force, but by surrender. That was the part that haunts you most. The voluntary breaking, the way each girl lowered her eyes, the way she accepted the rewriting of her identity, the way she internalized the silence as holy rather than oppressive. You realize you're witnessing something far more disturbing than violence. You're witnessing belief weaponized with precision and patience. And the priests, they perfected it. Their method became a tradition, a system, a way of ensuring absolute loyalty, absolute control, absolute obedience. A girl who emerged from the ritual of silence no longer thought of herself as a person. She was an instrument, a vessel, a possession. And the men controlling the ritual, those calm, disciplined priests, wielded that possession like a tool for influence, diplomacy, fear, and power. The ritual was not merely meant to silence. It was meant to erase. You stand there now, imagining the countless girls who stepped into this chamber, their futures predetermined before they even understood what choice meant. You imagine the echo of their breaths, their quiet sobs swallowed by stone. You imagine the toll it took to force your mind to abandon your own identity. This was the priest's signature method, their darkest innovation. Not a weapon forged of metal, but of faith, twisted into something unrecognizable. And you realize this was the most effective ritual in the entire temple, not because it punished the disobedient, but because it created the perfect obedient, a silence more powerful than any scream. You feel it the moment you step out of the ritual chamber. The atmosphere changes. It's slight at first, a shift in the temperature, a tightening of the air, a silence that lingers a little too long. The temple walls, once echoing with chants, now vibrate with something else. Not reverence, tension. It's as if the priests themselves can sense it, though none dare name it aloud. Their strides are sharper, their conversations shorter. Their eyes flicker toward shadows that never bothered them before. You follow their gaze and realize what frightens them. For the first time, they are being watched, not by gods, not by virgins, but by something far more dangerous. People. Whispers have begun seeping through the city. Whispers of disappearances. Whispers of corrupted rituals. Whispers of priests who held too much power and obscured too much truth. The temple had always been untouchable, cloaked in mystique, protected by myth. But myths crack when too many questions collide against them. And now, the questions are multiplying. You hear them in the marketplace. Murmurs about the sacred virgins who never return home. Hushed conversations about strange noises heard outside the temple walls at night. Traders sharing rumors that the gods could not possibly demand the level of silence the priests impose. At first, the priests dismiss the concerns. People always fear what they don't understand, they tell themselves. But soon, fear turns into suspicion. Suspicion into doubt. Doubt into movement. The enemy is no longer invisible. It has a voice. And the most dangerous part, that voice is growing louder. You witness the fracture begin in the least likely place, among the temple workers, the young attendants and laborers, those who wash the floors, carry the offerings, light the lamps, maintain the daily operations. They have always kept quiet, conditioned to believe they were fortunate just to walk the temple corridors. But even they have limits. One evening, as you watch from the shadows, two young workers huddle behind a pillar, whispering urgently. "She didn't move today," one says, voice shaking. "I brought water, but she didn't respond." "You told the priests?" "They said she was in divine trance, but her skin was cold." Silence, heavy, fear-choked. "They're hiding something," the second finally whispers. A spark, tiny but dangerous, the kind that grows into inferno, because the workers talk to their families, and their families talk to neighbors, and neighbors talk to merchants, and merchants talk to traveling traders, and traveling traders carry stories across miles of desert, and suddenly the entire region knows the same truth. Something is wrong inside the temple, but the priests do not yield. They tighten their rules. They restrict movement. They silence workers with threats. They increase the number of guards at the entrances. Every action they take to appear strong only exposes their fear. And fear spreads faster than any rumor. Before long, the pressure reaches the royal court. The pharaoh, ever cautious, begins to hear complaints delivered through trembling voices. Not outright accusations. No one dares, but questions coated in politeness. Questions that plant seeds. Is the temple acting within the sacred laws? Has the high priest exceeded his authority? Are the virgins safe? For a ruler, such questions are poison, because unrest at the temple means unrest among the people. And unrest among the people threatens the stability of the throne. The pharaoh dispatches inspectors, quietly, subtly, disguised as ordinary citizens. They blend into the city, watching, listening, taking note of every tense glance, every missing girl, every secretive priest. The priests notice, and paranoia begins to devour them. You see it in their eyes during rituals, darting left, right, scanning the room, as if enemies lurk in every shadow. Their once confident movements become sharp, frantic, almost desperate. They chastise workers for the smallest mistakes. They double the frequency of the ritual of silence, forcing more virgins into obedience in hopes of compensating for their crumbling external control. But they are fighting a battle they cannot win, because the enemy is not a man, not an army, not a rival priesthood. The enemy is truth, and truth always rises. One night, the tension breaks. A young virgin, one who had just undergone the ritual of silence, flees the temple, sprinting barefoot into the city streets. Her breaths come in uneven gasps, her eyes wild, her hair tangled. She collapses in the marketplace, surrounded by startled merchants. You watch as she tries to speak, but no sound escapes. Her lips move, but silence spills out instead. Broken, mutilated silence. A silence that terrifies the crowd more than any scream. Someone rushes to help. Someone else runs to the palace. Someone else gathers a crowd. Torches ignite. Voices rise. Shouts fill the night. And the priests, they hear it. A mob is forming. A force they never prepared for. An enemy they cannot intimidate. The people want answers. Inside the temple, chaos erupts. Priests scramble through the corridors, debating whether to hide evidence or destroy it. The high priest stands rigid, gripping his staff so tightly you can see his knuckles whiten. "This is a test," he mutters. "The gods will shield us." But even he doesn't sound convinced. You realize then that the priests are trapped not by the crowd gathering outside their sacred gates, but by the walls they built around themselves, walls made of silence, fear, and control. And those walls are beginning to crack. The rising conflict is here, and it is unstoppable, if you want. I can continue immediately with Chapter 8, the climax, 900 plus words. You hear the crowd long before you see them. It begins as a low rumble, distant, distorted by the thick stone walls of the temple. At first, it could be mistaken for a passing storm or heavy desert winds, but then the sound grows, deepens, multiplies. It becomes voices layered on voices, anger mixing with fear, outrage blending with disbelief. You step into the outer corridor and feel the vibration under your feet. The very floor quivers with the weight of hundreds pushing forward, shouting, demanding answers. Torches glow beyond the temple gates, casting orange flashes against the tall pillars. For the first time, the temple is no longer a sanctuary. It's a siege. The priests rush through the hallways like ants disturbed from a nest. Their robes flutter behind them, their sandals slap violently against the stone, their voices whisper frantic strategies. They want the virgins released. They demand to see the high priest. The girl they found, she breathed no sound. Prepare the guards, but you can see the truth in every tense face. They have never feared the people before, never imagined they would have to. The high priest stands at the heart of the chaos, stoic, unmoving. His eyes burn with a furious disbelief, as though the very idea of the crowd's defiance is an insult to the gods themselves. Or worse, an insult to him. He raises his staff. The priests silence themselves instantly. "We do not bend," he says, voice trembling with rage. "We do not yield to ignorance. The gods chose us. Our rituals are holy, our purpose divine, but beneath his authority, beneath the layered centuries of ritual, you can sense it, fear, because the crowd is not here for answers anymore. They are here for justice, and justice cannot be reasoned with." The gates shake violently as fists and torches collide with wood and bronze. Guards brace themselves, pushing back, shouting orders, their eyes wide and uncertain. You watch the high priest's jaw tighten. He motions for a select group of priests to follow him. They disappear into the inner sanctum, heading exactly where you feared they would go. The virgins. You move quickly, weaving through panicked attendants and frantic priests, your heart pounding in your chest. The corridors feel smaller than ever, narrowing like a throat, closing around a scream. You reach the chamber. It is darker than before, quieter. The air feels heavier, almost suffocating. The virgins sit in silence, their faces pale, their eyes unfocused, their bodies still as statues. The ritual of silence has already taken so much from them that even fear does not break through the emptiness in their gaze. But the high priest has come not to protect them. He has come to erase the evidence. The people cannot see them like this, he snarls, stepping into the room. Their silence will be interpreted as guilt. Another priest hesitates. But they are sacred. They are tools, the high priest snaps. Nothing more. You watch in stunned horror as they begin preparing the chamber. For what? You do not yet know. But you can feel the darkness coiling, thickening, gathering like a shadow with intention. Then it hits you. The high priest is going to sacrifice them. Every single one. Better dead than exposed. You feel your breath stop. He raises his staff and begins chanting. The other priests join him. Their voices echo against the stone, rising like a terrible storm. A bowl is brought forward. Knives glint in the lamplight. It's happening. The same ritual that once erased identities is now going to erase lives. But before the first blow can fall, a sound splits the chamber. Not a chant, not a scream, a crash. The gates have fallen. The crowd surges inside. You hear the roar of voices rushing through the temple halls, torches blazing, sandals slamming, people shouting names, crying out for daughters, nieces, sisters. The air trembles with fury. The high priest's chant falters. He spins around, eyes wild. "No," he barks. "Seal the chamber. Seal it now." But it's too late. The doors burst open. The mob storms in. It is chaos, pure, unstoppable chaos. People shove past guards, knocking them to the floor. Some fall to their knees beside the virgins, crying their names, clutching their hands. Others shout at the priests, brandishing sticks and stones, demanding to know what has been done. The high priest raises his staff, trying to restore control. "Silence," he thundered. "You dare defy the will of the gods?" A stone hits him across the face, cutting his cheek. The people do not stop, do not listen, do not fear him anymore. Where are the missing girls? What have you done to them? Who gave you the right to take their voices? Bring out the bodies. Every accusation lands like a blow. You watch as the high priest's composure disintegrates. His mask of divine authority crumbles. He lifts his staff again, voice breaking as he shouts, "They were chosen! They wanted this!" The crowd surges forward. His staff is knocked aside. His robes are torn. His authority is shattered. And in that moment, the truth becomes painfully clear. The silence he built, the silence that protected him, has finally turned against him. The very virgins he sought to control now sit as living proof of his crimes. The crowd closes in, priests scatter, guards flee, and the high priest, once untouchable, now stands alone in a room filled with the consequences of his own rituals. You lock eyes with him. For the first time, you see not power, not divinity, but a man afraid of the sound of his own legacy collapsing. And as the crowd grabs him, dragging him toward the gate he once walked through as a god among men, you realize this is the moment the hook came from. This is the night the truth was revealed. This is the night the temple fell. The night the silence finally broke. The walls of the temple, once a fortress of fear, now feel like a cage collapsing in on itself. You can hear the echoes of footsteps, shouts, and cries ricocheting through the chambers, bouncing off carved stone like 1,000 accusing voices. The high priest stumbles, tripping over the edge of the marble floor, his robes catching on pillars as the crowd surges forward. The authority that once radiated from him like heat has evaporated, leaving only the raw, exposed fragility of a man who believed himself untouchable. You watch him lift his head, and in his eyes, you see the first flicker of true terror. Not for his life, but for the empire of silence he built with decades of manipulation and cruelty. That carefully cultivated world, the one where his word was law, and the chants of the virgins, his secret arsenal, is gone, torn away by those he deemed powerless. And in that tearing, something inside him shatters. The crowd presses closer, fists shaking, voices raised. People who once bowed in fear now speak with the audacity of truth. They demand explanations. They demand justice. They demand the names of every priest complicit in the years of hidden abuses. And for every shout, for every accusation, you see the high priest's control crumble further. He tries to respond, to reclaim his dignity, but every word is swallowed by the roar of thousands, a tidal wave he cannot hope to stem. Inside, the virgins huddle together, trembling yet alive. They no longer obey, no longer shrink under the gaze of the priests. Their silence has been broken, not by ceremony, not by ritual, but by the uprising of those who refused to look away. For the first time, they glimpse freedom. And with that freedom comes a quiet fury, a weight that presses against their small frames, a knowledge that they are no longer pawns, but witnesses, bearers of truth that cannot be buried in stone or masked in chants. The high priest lashes out, striking with the ceremonial staff, shouting that they will all be damned, that the gods themselves demand obedience. But no one listens. The very temple walls, etched with prayers and symbols, feel empty now, hollow, under the weight of a collective awakening. Every strike of the staff is met with defiance. Every command dissolves into the chaos, and in that chaos, the first seeds of self-destruction bloom. He turns on his own priests, the ones who once stood beside him as instruments of control. "You swore loyalty," he bellows, but the words fall flat. One by one, they step aside, casting their own fear aside. Some attempt to flee. Others are grabbed by the crowd and held accountable. Betrayal, long suppressed under fear, bursts forth like fire from a dry brush. The high priest realizes too late that power built on silence, secrecy, and manipulation cannot withstand scrutiny, cannot endure when the very people it subjugated rise against it. And yet he fights, not for redemption, not for mercy, but for survival. The corridors become a theater of desperation. He hurls curses, threats, and blame, every gesture more frantic than the last. He cannot comprehend that the empire he constructed is unraveling because he treated humanity as a tool, because he underestimated the cost of silencing truth. The same rituals he perfected to control others now imprison him in panic and paranoia. You can see it in his hands, trembling at first, then gripping tighter until the knuckles whiten. The staff that once commanded silence now becomes a symbol of his isolation. Allies he trusted, apparent friends, turn away or betray him openly. Some whisper to the crowd, some push him toward their judgment. Every step he takes feels heavier, each breath more labored, each glance met with suspicion. He is cornered, not by a general or soldier, but by the inevitability of consequences he thought he could outrun. Outside, the crowd presses the gates open. Light floods the inner sanctum. Shadows vanish, and in that illumination, the full scope of his failures becomes undeniable. The carved pillars, once proud and imposing, now seem grotesque, their symbols hollow. The high priest's robes are torn, his mask of divinity shattered. He stumbles forward, seeking any form of dominance, but the people refuse to cower. The terror he wielded for decades rebounds onto him, crushing his will with a speed that shocks even the most seasoned onlookers. And then comes the final mistake, the one that seals his fall. In a desperate bid to reclaim authority, he attempts the last act of the ritual, calling upon the virgins to kneel, to obey, to restore his dominion. But the virgins, the very instruments of his power, refuse. Silence has been broken. Fear has been replaced by awareness. They step aside, their eyes wide but defiant. The high priest screams, but his voice is drowned in the chorus of the awakened. Every chant, every command, every attempt to dominate is met with rejection. Paranoia consumes him entirely. He lashes out at the walls, the pillars, anyone near him. His own body betrays him. Exhaustion, stress, and sheer terror twist him into an almost grotesque figure of a man who once seemed untouchable. The final realization comes like a thunderclap. All his power was a lie. All his authority was constructed on the fragile foundations of fear, silence, and deception. And now, stripped of those, he is nothing. The crowd drags him from the temple floor. His voice cracks with futile pleas. His eyes, once piercing and commanding, dart wildly, searching for escape, for allies, for some shred of the control he once held. But the gates are open. The people are unafraid, and his empire of silence lies in ruins. His own priests, scattered and powerless, watch the spectacle with silent resignation. Some had foreseen it, others had tried to prevent it, but none can reverse it now. You watch the high priest disappear into the streets, the city swallowing him like a predator devouring its prey. The temple, once a monument to fear and ritual, is left behind, empty chambers echoing the aftermath of cruelty. The virgins, trembling yet alive, emerge into the light. The people gather around them, protective, reverent in a new way, not worshipful of gods, but honoring the resilience of humanity. And in the silence that follows, the lesson becomes impossible to ignore. Power that preys on fear, secrecy, and manipulation can never endure when confronted by truth. Even the mightiest, most calculated figures will fall if they underestimate the awakening of the world around them. The high priest's fall is total, not violent in death, but total in destruction. The collapse of authority, the shattering of ritual, the annihilation of fear. His final fatal mistake was thinking control could exist without conscience, without accountability, without humanity. And in that collapse, the story leaves you with a question that hangs heavier than any ritual, any chant, any silence. What is the cost of building a kingdom on fear? And who pays it in the end?